Hello there and welcome to Westmen Rebooted podcast. We are very close to the new season kicking off. It's Monday now. Yesterday the Community Shield was played. Arsenal won on penalties. And it's prediction time again, so I guess I should probably go straight to the point and start telling my prediction, because it'll take decent amount of time, a chunk of time, for me to go through all my predictions again, as it did last year. Last year my predictions didn't exactly go too well. Well, I did predict that City would win the Premier League, which they did, and I also predicted them to win the Champions League, which they also did. So I guess it was decent, and well, I also did get Bayern winning Bundesliga and PSG winning Ligue 1. But I can do better, and I hope I will. I think I'll probably start off the easy, obvious ones that you don't really even have to think of anything when you make the prediction. Just comes straight out of the shelf. So, well, Ligue 1, PSG again, surprisingly. Bundesliga, again, very surprisingly, Bayern. Then La Liga, I'll go with Real Madrid because I think they have a better squad than Barcelona, and they have a better manager than them. So I think they'll win it this time, and even though Carlo has never won more than one league title at each country he's managed in, I think he will now break that curse with the 4-4-2 diamond, which it seems to be from the preseason games at least. Serie A, Inter, and funnily enough, I predicted the exact same winners in all of these 4 competitions last season, and I got 2 of them right. Maybe I'll get 4 of them right this. I doubt I'll get all 4 right, but maybe 3. Serie A is always a bit tough to predict, because it could be Inter, it could be Juve, it could be AC Milan, it could be Roma, it could be any of 5 teams. It's so inconsistent how Serie A goes. It's always difficult trying to pick out the winner. Not to forget Napoli too, of course, the reigning champions. And La Liga, of course, Barcelona could win as they did last year. They go Gundogan there from City on a free, and they sold Dembele to PSG, and they're replacing him with, I don't remember who, but someone who's not really good enough to replace Dembele, in my opinion. They're trying to get Joao Cancelo from City, but we'll see if that happens. Barcelona could, of course, win it again, but I think Real Madrid will win it this time. Then let's go to Carabao Cup. I don't know, where the energy drink company Carabao is from. So that's why I'm just pronouncing it in 3 different ways here. I don't know why I care so much about pronunciation, but that's me. League Cup, anyway, English League Cup. I think City will win. Manchester City. FA Cup, Manchester City. I guess you can see where this is going. But I can tell you, no, I am not going to predict City to win the quadruple. I would have done if they had signed Mbappe, but they don't seem to be doing that. I think he'll stay at PSG and go to Real Madrid for free next year. And they will play him even though they're threatening that they'll keep him on the bench. But no, they're not stupid, and they're not that stupid to pay him that much and then keep him on the bench all year. They just lose more money than they will now when if they play Mbappe and then let him go for free next summer. Yeah, FA Cup, City. Conference League, Aston Villa. Because, it's Unai Emery, their manager, and he's won like 3 Europa Leagues or something like that. And, it's just, all the teams there are basically, not that good. So Western won it last year. So I think it's going to become the norm that the Premier League teams in Conference League will win it too. Europa League, I think, will go to Liverpool, unfortunately. Because, I had a look at their squad and their preseason games, and everything seems to point toward the fact that they are going back to their very best this season, I believe, unfortunately, as an Evertonian, of course. I think they will be as good as they were in their Premier League winning season. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they will win the Premier League, as you might discover later when I go through my Premier League predictions position by position. Champions League, Real Madrid. So no, I'm not predicting City to win the quadruple. I picked Real because I think Carlo will win his 5th UCL and then move on to manage Brazil and win the World Cup with them, and then become the unarguable greatest ever manager by achievements at the very least. And that's just the only reason I picked it, because picked them. I mean, it's always difficult to predict the Champions League winner because it's the coincidence factor is so much higher than it is in domestic leagues, because knockout competitions just are so different, As I talked, I believe, in the last podcast before this one, episode 2 of Westmen Rebooted, I believe. Now let's go to my Premier League predictions. 20. Well, I guess you probably all know who I'm going to pick for 20th, as I've said it about 17 times on Discord already. Well, it's Luton Town, of course. They might well break the record for the least points ever in a Premier League season. I did check their stats last season from Championship. Their attack was really poor, but their defense was quite good. So they might be able to pick up some 1-0 wins at home, some 0-0 draws away, but I can't see them finishing anywhere above 19th. I believe I said the exact same thing about Nottingham Forest last season, so I hope that I have better luck this season and they don't miraculously do something unexpected. But to be fair, Nottingham Forest made about 37 signings last summer, whereas Luton have made like 5. So that's why I don't believe they will be able to do the same. Also because they didn't have as good a season in Championship statistically as Forest did the previous season. So 19. Another newly promoted team, but it's certainly not Burnley, it's Sheffield United. I do like Sheffield United. Well, I liked them when Wilder was their manager, but well, I don't like them as much with Paul Heckingbottom. Sorry, it's my chair squeaking here, like a pig, squealing like a pig. Yeah, I don't like them as much with Paul Heckingbottom, but essentially he's just copied Wilder's tactics. And you know, of course, Sheffield United in 1920, when they first got promoted with Wilder, they finished ninth in the Premier League. But then the next season, their owners didn't give them a good budget. They essentially gave them nothing, even though they had a very good season, and their owners are sheikhs. So they still didn't give Wilder any budget, really. And then they finished rock bottom. But I don't think they'll finish hecking bottom this time. So you see the joke then, this is Paul hecking bottom, yeah. But I think they'll be 19th. You know, they had a pretty good attack last season in the Championship. And they have a good defense. They have good centre-backs. They have a solid defense. They had a really good defense in 1920, but they were also really lucky not to concede a lot more goals then. So I believe they will finish 19th indeed. 18. Now this is the first properly controversial one that might go wrong. Well, of course, the first two might go wrong as well, but like this is the first one that's fairly likely to go wrong, because I have picked Wolverhampton Wanderers, to finish 18th, because last season they were actually really lucky to stay up, and they've lost Ruben Neves, they've lost Raul Jimenez, even though he didn't really play for them last season. They've lost Nathan Collins, and they've not really made any signings. Like I checked, there aren't really any rumors, and you know, we saw what happened with Julen Lopetegui's Sevilla last season. They were in the relegation zone, and then he got sacked and got appointed by Wolves. And I think the same may very, very well happen this year, because they've not really made any signings, and they created very few chances last season and finished very few chances too. And their defense wasn't specifically good either. So I think they will be 18th this year and get relegated back to Championship where they belong. I don't really dislike Wolves, but yeah. 17. Nottingham Forest. See, I've seen a certain Forest fan in the club Discord saying, oh, we've not signed anyone, we'll finish rock bottom with nil points. But when I looked at the squads of all of these teams, they've not really lost any key players. Well, of course, Keylor Navas went back to PSG after his loan, and they don't really have a great keeper. But what kept them up last year was essentially Morgan Gibbs-White and Brennan Johnson, and they have those two players. And you know, Wolves have some good individual players too, but they didn't really produce anything great last season. And you know, Ruben Neves, also Wolves lost Joao Moutinho, and all of these three Ruben Neves, Joao Moutinho and Raul Jimenez were all important creators and finishers last year, and they've not really managed to properly replace them, even though they got a lot of money for Neves. So it'll be interesting to see indeed if my prediction on them is correct, or if they perhaps do some very late transfer market activity that leads them to having a better squad than they have at the time of my predictions. I made these predictions yesterday on Sunday after Community Shield. So, if something really weird happens, like Chelsea sign Mbappe or something that's massive, then don't blame me. Don't blame me for underestimating the team because they make a late signing that's really fundamental to their success this season. I can't predict that. I'm here to predict the league table, not transfers. But I still had to predict a bit of transfers. I had to assume that Spurs will sell Kane. I assumed that Mbappe won't go to Chelsea. Those are what I based my predictions on. That these transfers happen or don't happen. So it's really difficult predicting. Nowadays, when the transfer window is open for 3 weeks after the league starts, it's really weird. And so many clubs have left their signings for so late on as well. There are so many clubs with like 18, 19 players in their squad, and that just makes predicting so much more difficult for me, which is why, of course, it's also very little margins, finishing 16th or 17th or 18th. It's very small margins there, and luck just sometimes. It's basically pure luck sometimes, whether you finish 15th or 16th. And a lot of these teams are really tight with each other. Like, for example, here. Well, before I do this speech, I'll tell who I picked 16th. Bournemouth. They sacked Gary O'Neill, which I disagree with, and they got Rodrigo Ibanez or something like that from Spain, from Rayo Vallecano, to replace him, who I had never heard of. So that also makes it a bit harder for me to make these predictions. Bournemouth are owned by the same owner who owns Las Vegas Golden Knights, who won the NHL championship last season, like 2 months ago. And their owner has said that they'll spend Bournemouth will spend as much as they are allowed each summer. Well, they haven't really spent that much this year. They've got Justin Kluivert, and he's not a bad player, but I don't know much about him. It will be interesting to see how good he is, how good he's not. But they were also quite, well, in fact, very lucky not to be relegated by the XG stats last year. I had an unexpected interruption, and during the break I had to take, I noticed that I've actually done 3 episodes of this rebooted version of the podcast now, so this is the 4th episode. I believe I said earlier that this is the 3rd one. Well, that doesn't really matter. Back to the prediction. Bournemouth. So, 16th Bournemouth. And of these 5, the bottom 5, I believe, Bournemouth, Nottingham, Wolves, Sheffield United and Luton. I believe these 5 will be the ones who will be in the relegation battle late in the season. But I believe that, of course, well, last season there were like 8 teams in the relegation battle throughout the season. So I think the same may well happen next season. But these 5 will be the ones fighting for survival in the last 5 game weeks or so. 15, Fulham. And, well, they were really lucky to finish as high as they did. What was it, 10th, 11th last season, according to XG stats. And they seem to be losing Mitrovic. And should they lose him, I think they could very much fall into the relegation battle and possibly even get relegated. If they lose Mitrovic and don't replace him with a proper striker, they have bought Raul Jimenez, but I don't know if he's really good enough to replace Mitrovic. I don't think he's as good as Mitrovic. So if they don't replace Mitrovic with another striker other than Jimenez, then I don't think they will do anywhere near as well as last season. And even if they do replace him with a good striker, I think they'll finish 15th. 14, Burnley. I don't really know too much about Company's Burnley, but I've checked the stats, and in the last 5 years or so, most newly promoted teams that have played attacking possession-based football have stayed up and done quite well. Sheffield United in 1920, Leeds United in 2021, was it? Brentford when they came up. Brighton have been doing well for quite some time now. Basically everyone apart from Norwich have done well, who have played attacking football, especially in their first season after getting promotion. Also Fulham last season, of course. So that's why I believe Burnley will be 14th. And I don't really have too much to say about them. They might get relegated. This might be a miss prediction from me. They might not do as well as I predicted, but I've seen a few other people predict them finishing fairly close to what I'm predicting here. 13, my dear Everton. I have to say that I predicted us to finish 13th last year too, and we finished 17th. At least we stayed up, but according to XG stats, we should have been higher up on the table last season, but we were unlucky. We didn't finish our chances well because Calvert-Lewin was injured, so for basically the whole season, and Mopé is shit. And we did not have a goal-scoring winger. Now we have Arnaud Danjuma, and I hope we will sign Wilfred Gnonto from Leeds too, or Kamaldeen Sulemana from Southampton, because we don't have. Demarai Gray is going to Fulham, so our only wingers are Dwight McNeil and Arnaud Danjuma, because it seems like Dyche is putting Iwobi back into the midfield, as we seem to be changing into a 4-3-3, not dissimilar to the 4-3-3 that Pep and Klopp used a few years back, and what Klopp uses now, still, I believe. If Calvert-Lewin stays fit, I think we'll definitely be close to top half. Well, maybe not close to top half as in terms of points, but in terms of position at least. Because we have a good squad. Our starting lineup will probably be about Pickford, Mikolenko, or even Ashley Young as left back, then the centre backs Tarkowski and Godfrey, Branthwaite, or hopefully not, but perhaps Michael Keane, right back Nathan Patterson, as a defensive mid Idrissa Gana Gueye or Amadou Onana. Then on midfield we have options like Iwobi, James Garner, and Abdoulaye Doucouré, and on the wings Danjuma and McNeil, and hopefully we get Nyonto or Sulemana too. Calvert-Lewin up top, and of course we are signing Youssef Chermiti from Sporting now, who we beat, by the way, on Saturday in a friendly 1-0. That's great, with a penalty though. The Calvert-Lewin scored, thankfully. But yeah, I think we will be doing better this season indeed. So 13th. 12. Crystal Palace. They lost Wilfred Zaha. I've always thought Zaha is very overrated, but he was an important player for Palace nonetheless. They've not really made a lot of signings. I don't know if they've replaced him. They've signed a Brazilian attacking midfielder who's apparently talented for like 20 million. They have Roy Hodgson. They did really well since Hodgson was reappointed last season. Michael Olise seems to be going to City or Chelsea, so it'll be interesting to see how that ends up. But I think they will finish 12th because they had actually very good defensive XG stats last season and a pretty decent keeper too, of course, in Huerta. And well, their attack isn't too bad either, although I think they do still need a striker. But yeah, 11 West Ham, last season's Conference League winners, of course. This season playing in Europa League. The last season XG stats showed that they were pretty much 10th, 11th. So they've not really made a lot of signings. They sold Declan Rice, and now they are replacing him with Edson Alvarez from Ajax, and Bowen had a fairly poor season last season, but I think he'll do well again this season like he did 2 years ago, and they'll finish 11th, I think. 10th, Brentford, of course missing Ivan Toney because he fucked around and found out, so to speak. I think Brian Bumo is quite capable of scoring double digits, and they have Kevin Schade and some other strikers too, I think. Oh yeah, by the way, talking about missing strikers, Sheffield United sold Ilman Ndiaye to Marseille, and of course he was their top goal scorer and top goal contributor last season, and they've replaced him with a 19-year-old Swedish striker who scored 12 goals in like 16 games in the Swedish league last season. So it's a punt they're taking, but I don't think it'll pay off well enough for them to stay up. Anyway, Brentford. I mean, they're a very good team owned by the owner of Smart Odds, who collect data of expected goals, and that's how they get bargain signings and sell players for massive profit. And well, 10th just seems about right because they'll have Tony for the last 4 months or so, the second half of the season, something like that. So I think they'll be fine. 9, Aston Villa, whom I also predicted to win the Conference League, of course. I think they'll be the same way as Westmen last season, finished like 13th or something like that, and won the Conference League. The Conference League affects their league performance slightly negatively because they don't have a team, a squad that has the depth to really rotate players enough to give the key players enough rest over the course of the season. So, and well, because I think all the 8 teams I put above them are better than them. So that's why Aston Villa are 9th, even though they were very good, especially attackingly, under Unai Emery last season. But I don't think they will reach Europe through the league. However, I indeed think they will win the Conference League and so forth, qualify for Europa League next season. And now at this point, when we are very much nearing the European spots, I think it's good to notice one thing, which is that in 24-25, the Champions League, Europa League and Conference League will be switched into 36 team formats, and each team will play 8. Well, in the Champions League, each team will play 8 league stage games. In Europa League and Conference League, it's 6 games for some reason. And then the 8 first teams, 8 best teams in the league stage, will qualify straight for the round of 16 in each competition, whereas 9th to 24th will play in a playoff round to face the first 8, and 25th from 25th to 36th they just drop out of everything. So no longer do teams drop from Champions League to Europa League or Europa League to Conference League. And because there are 4 more teams, of course there need to be more European spots too, and well, the first 4, the top 4 is obviously going to get into Champions League, but also of course Europa League winner and Champions League winner, but also the 2 countries that do the best in the European competitions, that have the best coefficient rating for next season, for this season 23-24, will receive the 2 top countries in the coefficient this season will receive 1 extra spot. So for example, if Premier League is one of those, then they'll have 5 teams in the Champions League, and if La Liga are the other of those 2, then they'll have 5. So basically it's not just top 4 now. In fact, probably the top 5 teams in the Premier League will get Champions League, for which I don't think there has ever been a better time, because there are so many teams that, I think, well, they are contending for top 4. So it was really tough for me to choose this, and I want to say about the relegation predictions too. Any of the bottom 5, I think Luton and Sheffield United will get relegated definitely, but then the 18th spot could go to Wolves, Forest or Bournemouth, possibly even Fulham if they lose Mitrovic and don't replace him. But I picked Wolves because at the moment of predicting they seem the weakest team out of those, and it's very much the same with my, well, every team in top 10, top 11, well, top 9 more than anything else. It was really marginal differences between some of the teams, so it's really tough for me to slot these teams into these spots, because they're so tight, in my opinion, how they will fare this season. 8, Brighton. See, their last season XG stats made this really difficult for me with Brighton, because they created like third most expected goals and conceded the fourth least, something like that, so they're ridiculously good. But they did lose their top scorer, Alexis McAllister, with 10 goals in the Premier League last season, and they seem to be losing Moises Caicedo to Chelsea. However, they have a fairly clinical striker in Joao Pedro now, so maybe they will finish their chances better, but I still just don't rate them as highly as the 7 teams above them for this season, for various reasons. Of course, Brighton are also in Europa League for this season, so maybe that will also weaken their league performance. 7, Chelsea. Now 6th and 7th, the teams here, that was probably the tightest decision I had to make, which of them I put 6th and which 7th. Well, I guess I can tell you that I put Tottenham at 6th. And I just had a really difficult time, because they're so similar in terms of quality at the moment, I think. And especially if Kane leaves, which I think he will do, then that does weaken Spurs. And that could be the deciding factor between Spurs and Chelsea. But I still put Spurs 6th, even though I think Kane will leave. See, now midfield, I think, is what eventually decided it for me, because Chelsea, well, they'll have Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez, probably Caicedo anyway. And then I believe they play in a 4-2-3-1 with Christopher Nkunku as a number 10, Mikhailo Mudryk as the left winger, Raheem Sterling as the right winger, and Nicholas Jackson up top. That's the way I think they'll be playing. Whereas Spurs will be playing also in 4-2-3-1 with James Maddison as the number 10, Heung-min Son as the left winger, Dejan Kulusevski as the right winger, and then whoever as their striker. I hope it's Richarlison, because I like Richarlison a lot, but I just doubt that they would take such a big risk. I doubt they have the balls to take the risk of having Richarlison as a starting striker after having a poor season last season for Spurs, and because they'll have about £100 million to spend if they sell Kane. Then they could go and get like Lukaku, even though he seems to be going to Juve. Or they could, I don't know who they would get, to be honest, which is why it may well be so that Richarlison is their starting striker. They signed some Argentinian striker, but he seemed too young and inexperienced for me to think that he would be anywhere near a starter. So Chelsea, Spurs, really close in my opinion. So they could finish either way, because luck always plays a part in football. So that was the toughest decision for me, to decide which of these is 6th and which 7th, but I just picked 6th because for me, what actually decided was I took a look at each team's pre-season performances, and those just showed the Spurs were much more dominating than Chelsea, and maybe they'll have a quicker start, and then that's what decides their positioning. 5, Newcastle United. Very good last season, very good. They've signed Harvey Barnes, very good signing in my opinion. I don't know why teams like I don't know. Maybe it's exactly the right level of team, because teams above them, teams that I've placed above them, have pretty good players at those positions. So maybe they don't just need him. But yeah, a very good signing anyway, in my opinion, to replace, replace. Maxima scored like 5 goals in 5 years or something like that in his time at Newcastle. He was shite, very overrated, just because he has some flashy skills in him. Oh, piss off. Anyway, I think Newcastle, of course they signed Sandro Tonali. They have a decent midfield, Tonali, then there's Joelinton and Bruno Guimaraes is in that their midfield now. Their defense is Pope in goal, then Dan Burn or Matt Target as the left back. I would think probably Dan Burn was last season anyway, and of course Sven Botman and Fabian Schär, centre backs. They signed Tino Livramento as well. I don't know if he'll play as a centre back or a right back, or maybe Eddie Howe will invert him into an inverted left back. Of course, Trippier is a right back. Then their front three, I believe, would be like Barnes, then either Callum Wilson, or Alexander Isak, and maybe Miguel Almiron, because it could be Elliot Anderson too, but I don't know. I really don't know. And right now, during recording, I've received a notification from Fabrizio Romano that Youssef Chermiti is in the UK to complete his move to Everton with medical book deal in place. That's nice to see. 4. Manchester United. Had a pretty decent last season. Well, won the League Cup and finished 4th, didn't they? Or 3rd or 4th? 4th, wasn't it? Yeah, I think so. In the league. And now they've signed Andre Onana, who I think would be a decent keeper. He's better better of feet than De Gea was, but saving probably about the same level. And they've signed, of course, Rasmus Højlund from Atalanta. They've signed Mason Mount, and they seem to be playing in a 4-3-3 still, with Casemiro behind Mount and Bruno Fernandes, and I think they are better than last season now, because last season, well, not because of this, but last season they played 4-2-3-1. Now they're going to 4-3-3, and I think that's a wise move to accommodate Mount. And I guess their lineup will look like Onana in goal, Varane and Martinez as centre backs, Luke Shaw and Diogo Dalot, I guess, as the right back, maybe Wan-Bissaka at some point in some games. Casemiro behind Bruno and Mount, Rashford and maybe Anthony. I guess Anthony will be their main right winger, and Højlund up top. So yeah, Man United 4th, but this season I don't think they will win any trophies. 3. Arsenal. Had a really good last season, but the signings they made, I don't think they really improved them a lot. Yuri and Timber was good against City, but I don't think he even him really makes them a better team. Kai Havertz paying £70 million for him, Declan Rice paying £100 million for him. I don't think they make them ultimately better. They should have got a proper striker. They got Gabriel Jesus and Eddie Nketiah, and now Havertz as their striker options. And I mean, Nketiah is the most clinical finisher out of those three, and that tells quite something. They should have gone for Vlahovic seems to be going to Chelsea now. Maybe Arsenal should have gone for him. They seem to be playing 4-3-3 with maybe either party behind Rice and Odegaard, or Rice behind Odegaard and Havertz. But because Jesus was injured, they played with a 4-2-3-1 yesterday against City in the Community Shield, with Partey and Rice behind Odegaard. At least I think it was like that. I've not actually checked the average positions, but that's, I think, the way they played yesterday. To Liverpool, if any team will give City a challenge for the title, then I think that's Liverpool. So I obviously hope not, but if some team will, then it's Liverpool. When they signed McAllister and Szoboszlai, I thought, okay, these are decent players, but do they really make them better? That's what I thought to myself. But when they were basically a super team, one of the best teams in the world, top 3 teams in the world a few years ago, they didn't have a particularly good midfield. And now they do. Especially if and when they sign Romeo Lavia. And their midfield is completely new and completely different and better. Especially with Alexander-Arnold seeming to play there as well, possibly. So I don't know how they are going to play. But, it's, if anything will fail them, then that's Darwin Núñez, but I don't think that will make them fail either. They just have a really complete team. Alisson, Robertson, Konate, Van Dijk, Alexander-Arnold, Lavia, Szoboszlai, McAllister, Jota, Núñez, Salah, Luis Diaz could be a starter too. Well, I had a look at the preseason games, and then Jota has started every single one of them, I think. So I guess he's going to be their main left winger. But yeah, it's not looking good for me, from my point of view, because I obviously hate Liverpool as an Evertonian, and I just hope they don't win anything. But I think they will win the Europa League, but still I don't think they will win the league, because City are just so dominant. City will win the league. I dare say that. But if anyone can challenge them for it this season, then that's Liverpool. So yes, number 1, Manchester City, and so that confirms I am predicting City to win the domestic treble this time around. And I think Haaland will be the top scorer in the league. Could be Salah too. Probably not really anyone else unless Kane stays at Spurs. Now this is already the longest edition of the Westmen Rebooted podcast that I've made, but I still want to talk a bit about club, because the game is launching into another season of testing soon, and I probably will be making some sort of short videos from that and giving tips and showing what changes I do, what sort of tactics like what my strategy is in the game. I think my next podcast will probably be in a few months. I won't promise any number of podcasts a year or any amount of time, maximum amount of time between podcasts, but I'll try to do this. Well, I think I can promise another one this year, but probably a lot more of the short videos focusing on club than these podcasts. I think that's all I have to say today. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you in a few months.